I move the question be now put.
Just checking.
Which one paid the most?
I think they're all in arrears. I call David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I want to just spend a couple of minutes commenting on the response that the Minister made to questions that rose as a result of some of the probing that came from this side on this particular part of the bill. I mean, and two things that he said I thought were really important. First of all, that the vouchers and the grant scheme that this government has brought in is their new way of stimulating the economic side of our science and innovation moving forward are oversubscribed. Oversubscribed. That's the word. Oversubscribed. Oversubscribed means that there's a whole bunch of different companies out there that didn't get a look at, that didn't actually get any of the grants or the vouchers. Now, why wouldn't they get a look in? Well, one of the reasons might be that some of these companies that have been put forward, many of them where people, the entrepreneurs behind them, have mortgaged their own house, have borrowed from friends, have gone to the bank, they're at the edge, because they've got a really good idea, an idea that, for example, like Facebook, like Google, like what, and these people went to the government department, went to the bureaucrat that decides on the vouchers and grants that are to be allocated. They went to those people and they were turned down. Now, contrast that to the tax credit. The tax credit, which would actually universally enable companies to be able to get R&D relief as a result of their own efforts, that would have brought about a cultural change in the companies in New Zealand, that would have lifted our appalling private sector R&D, which is about less than 1/3 of the OECD average, and would have actually brought about the transformation that this government says that it wants. It would have brought about the step change that it wants. But here's the other thing that the Minister said, and I come back to what he said in response to questions, that this is superior to our tax credits. Now, I just want to point out one piece of information that came up in the last few weeks, and I was going around talking to various people. First of all, that companies want the tax credit more than they want the grants. That is overwhelming. If you sit down and talk to a CEO of any company, that's exactly what they say. We would prefer the tax credit, of course. But we've got the grants, so we'll apply for them. And why will we apply for them? Because it means that we can shift money from we'll get more money for R&D, and we'll be able to use the money that we're going to be spending on R&D to fund other parts of the company. I mean, it's actually not stimulating more R&D, it's actually just keeping it more or less the same. But back to the point that this is superior. When the Labor government was putting in place the tax credit, they went to Australia and had a look at the Australian tax credit system over there to see what was available, what they were offering. The Australian system was effectively a 7% tax credit as it stood at that point, and it was very hard to administer, wasn't particularly seen as cutting edge. So we came back, our officials came back here and put together the tax credit that came in the last year of the Labor government, that was supported by the Treasury. 15% tax credit was going to cost about $37 million in its first year and rise to about $350 million after 5 years. It got voted out foolishly by this government when they came in. In Australia, the Rudd government came in, the Labor government in Australia came in. What did they do? First thing they did was they raised their R&D by 25%. And if we're looking to try and catch Australia, Mr. Chair, if we're looking to catch Australia, that's the first thing they did. I think it was a 6% increase that the total package of reforms that this government brought in the budget, a total of about 6%, versus Australia's 25%. But the really interesting thing that happened was that their officials came over to New Zealand, looked at our tax credit, and took it back to Australia. And what do we have in Australia right now? An almost carbon copy of the tax credit that we put in place here has now been put into Australia. Why? Because they recognised that this was the best thing that they could do to encourage innovation in companies throughout Australia. What an appalling loss of potential that this country, that resulted in this country as a result of this government cutting our tax credit. What an appalling loss. This Chair? Chair?